Over the past 16 years, fracking has expanded enormously. The number of active oil and gas wells in Colorado has almost doubled from 22,228 in 2000 to 43,354 in 2010. People have seen fracking as a negative thing in our environment.
First, they drill a hole in the ground about 8,000 feet down and then 4,000 feet over in the shale layer. They then pull the drill out and put the perforator down to break the shale. The perforator is pulled out and they put multiple casings of steel and cement to prevent some of the gas to leak out. 8 million gallons of fracking fluid is then dumped into the pipe. The fracking fluid fills the cracks and goes into the rock. After that, they suck all the fracking fluid out and then the gas starts to go up the pipe and they collect it.
The pros of fracking consist of more access to oil and gas, more jobs, better air quality compared to the other ways of getting gas, and more energy.
I don't believe fracking directly is affecting homes, and that question is highly dependent on how populated the area is near where hydraulic fracturing is occurring.
Our community faces no threat with hydraulic fracturing. We have about 3,300 active wells here. All of them have been fracked, sometimes multiple times. We have a long-standing basin history here since the 1940s, and the rules have changed, technologies have changed. Major rewrite of the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission rules in 2008, which has chemical disclosure rules as well as mechanical integrity, things like that really are protective to our environment, health, human health, animal health, all of that.
Fracking has its pros and cons. When fracking is done incorrectly, it can cause harm to people, wildlife, and our environment. When fracking is done wrong, it can release harmful fumes and gases into the air we breathe.
The most credible problem is road issues, whether it's maintenance of roads or speeding or dust. And we have a pretty large regulatory environment here, so a lot of it is like in a spring reminder to all the members, but because of this road program, we've actually put about $3.5 million into roads because we're using them with our neighbors. Other operators, if you're in a homeowners association, will enter into an agreement with the homeowners association to find solutions. So,
from my perspective, there are known quantifiable human health impacts associated with degraded air quality and degraded water quality that are really troubling.
However, there are some small-term and short-term effects of fracking, like the amount of noise that's created during the process, the immense amount of CO2 emissions created while those pumps are running and pumping that fluid down hole. And then there's also a small danger of inducing microseismic events.
Fracking unlocks valuable shale gas energy from oil shale reserves right here in America, powering our lives, fueling our economy, and securing our future. Having abundant energy and a good job in a growing economy are fundamental to the economic prosperity and social mobility of individuals and families alike.
I think the industry can be doing a better job of addressing some of these impacts. And I think that as a larger community, we can be doing a better job at moving away from fossil fuel extraction and moving towards renewable energy. It's not just a question of today's environmental and human health impacts. for this region, it's going to be critical as to our future economic development opportunities. Coal is most likely not going to be the energy of the future. And increasingly, with science showing the many negative impacts of oil and gas development, I think there's a real questionable future for oil and gas as well. There's a really bright future for cleaner, greener, renewable energy options. So what as a community are we doing to attract that type of industry to this community and to start diversifying our energy economy?
According to our research, we think that our community should use less fossil fuels and move towards renewable energy sources such as solar energy, wind energy, hydropower, geothermal, and biomass. By switching to renewable energy, we could use more healthy, clean energy without harming others and the environment. This would prevent gas leaks, water pollution, and road conditions. If you would like to contribute to stop fracking, locally contact the local BP office, 380 Airport Road, or contact this number, 970-247-6800.
Lake Powell, a beloved reservoir in the heart of the Colorado watershed.
Damming the waters of the mighty Colorado River and its tributaries, the Glen Canyon Dam was built in 1956 to control the water allocations in the lower Colorado River basin and provides electricity through the hydroelectric station.
Think of the benefits of all those thousands and thousands of people that get electricity from here. If you didn't get it from here, you'd probably have to get it from a coal plant someplace.
It also has major recreation impacts, and because of the recreation that the lake provides for people, it's a really popular destination.
Named after Major John Wesley Powell, who charted the area upon his expeditions in 1869 and 1872, Lake Powell filled behind the Glen Canyon Dam. In 1980, Lake Powell reached full pool, in which it reached its highest water level.
Today, the Glen Canyon Dam provides flood control, water supply, and electricity for the local communities, as well as allowing control over the water flow below the dam for water allocations to parts of Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and California. Not to mention, the dam supplies us with major tourist attractions. Tourists come from far and wide to enjoy recreational activities such as hiking, camping, fishing, boating, and other water sports on Lake Powell.
Go camping, fishing, swimming, just take advantage of it and enjoy it. That's why it's here.
The communities that surround Lake Powell not only benefit from it by being provided water and electricity, they are also supplied with jobs. One community that derives major benefits from Lake Powell is the Navajo Nation. Located over parts of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah in the Four Corners area, the Navajo Nation relies on Lake Powell for a large portion of their economy.
One of the big issues with Lake Powell that we sometimes forget is that the Navajo Nation gets a lot of their water from Lake Powell. Literally, the nation, the people themselves, get a degree of drinking water from the reservoir, and also grow a variety of crops off the reservoir.
Current concern facing those who benefit from Lake Powell is the declining water levels. It's not hard to tell that the amount of water in Lake Powell is declining, thanks to the bathtub ring along the canyon walls. Calcium bicarbonate in the water stains the sandstone on the sides of Lake Powell, and as the water levels drop, the mineral gets left behind on the sandstone. Therefore, we can see how the water levels have dropped by comparing it to the white mineral deposit on the canyon walls, because anywhere that the water has been on the walls of Lake Powell, the minerals will have stained them. At the Lake Powell level, as the water sits in the reservoir, water seeps through the porous sandstone and into the aquifer, and because of the dam, there is a large exposure of the surface area of the water, so more water can be evaporated.
Water is sitting on this sandstone, this very porous rock where water can just seep into and go down into the water, into the earth, just seep down into a water table, subterranean.
Upstream, there is less runoff from winter snowfalls, which minimizes the amount of water being fed into the river.
Powell wasn't here. In some years, we don't get enough water from the snowmelt from the mountains to meet the needs of the people downstream. Well, if we didn't have the water in Lake Powell here to help out with that, some years they'd run short down there.
I believe that some of the water policy that surrounds the Glen Canyon Dam was based on data that is not representative of how much water we actually have.
The Colorado, we use more of it than nature provides.
Along with less water being available, more water is being used. There is a higher demand for water despite the state allocations in an attempt to try and keep up with the need of our industrially flourishing society. We are using more and more water to try and keep these needs. Demand is constantly increasing as our society moves forward in industrialization, and more so as our population rapidly increases. Not only is the water level of Lake Powell directly affected by us, but our releasing of carbon dioxide also takes its toll on Lake Powell. As we use coal, natural gases, and oil to meet our requests for energy and manufacturing, we contribute to the potential for our planet to contain heat. We contribute to the global warming, which affects and likely was a part in causing drought in the Southwest, which limits the amount of water that is being supplied to the Colorado watershed. Lake Powell is a small part of a large picture. As we see water levels in Lake Powell drop, we know water levels in the overall Colorado watershed are dropping too. Today, the Colorado River no longer reaches the ocean. It is unable to complete its cycle because of the same reasons that the water level in Lake Powell is dropping.
Well, my opinion, honestly, is that if we can remove Lake Powell, we would gain 6% of the Colorado River flow overnight. Gaining 6%. 6% is the same amount as Nevada's entire allotment. We would gain that all of a sudden. So to remove Lake Powell would only result in the net gain of more water. There's nowhere else in the entire water system that we can look to get that type of immediate results that benefit us. So to remove it would absolutely help the entire 7 states that are directly tied to that as a lifeline.
Legally, if the water levels ever drop below the turbulence of the Glen Canyon Dam, the water in Lake Powell must be released.
I think the project of physically removing the Glen Canyon Dam from where it is in the bottom of that canyon is a pretty unattainable objective, but decommissioning it and allowing the river to flow freely through that area is an opportunity to restore one of the greatest natural treasures in our country.
We would literally bypass the river. They would bore new holes around the bottom of the dam and allow the river to flow by.
It's a desert, and we should treat it like one. We should learn to better conserve our water.
But the Southwest is a desert, and there shouldn't be big, expansive green lawns there. That's a luxury that is unnecessary and doesn't belong in the desert.
You know, yes, there is a lot of ways for us to look at ways to continue to increase our amount of efficiencies, and that goes across the board. The way we irrigate, what types of crops we grow, these are all alternatives to removing a dam.
When thinking about the future of Lake Powell and the Glen Canyon Dam, what do you think needs to be done? What are you willing to do?
Do I think recycling is worth it? Yes, I think recycling is absolutely worth it. There's a teeny tiny offset to the benefit from the additional collection. So when you have to run a second truck to pick up recycling instead of just one truck to send it all to the landfill, there's a slight increase in emissions from that. And all of the reports and studies that I have done show that that's a 2% offset to the benefit. So it's kind of hard to imagine how many emissions are released when we. The biggest part of our operations is construction waste recycling. So we bring in mixed construction debris from housing and commercial construction and remodels, and we sort it out. So we recycle wood. It's actually the biggest thing we recycle. Wood, cardboard, concrete, and metals that come out of the construction waste stream. So where do we send our materials and what happens to them after they get there? On the construction waste side, we grind up our own wood and we sell that as a mulch, a landscaping product. Cardboard we bale and ship. That's mostly going back to liner board. Basically it goes back into the little wavy layer on the inside of cardboard. We also ship a lot of shredded office paper. Most of that goes back into the paper tissue market, so paper towels and toilet paper. The single stream recycling that we collect today goes to the city of Durango, and they handle that product, and they ship that out to be separated and recycled.
What does it mean to recycle? Recycling extra valuable materials from items that might otherwise be considered trash and turns them into new products. How does it work? The city of Durango offers curbside recycling. Under the single stream recycling program, all recyclables except for glass can be recycled in one container. Glass can be taken to the recycling center. Electronics and batteries can also be recycled. When the city recycling picks up the recyclables, what happens to the materials? After the truck finishes its round, it takes all the recyclables up to the recycling center in Durango. When it gets there, the materials get sorted and sold to various places outside of Durango. What happens to the recycled materials? The materials are put into bales, which are placed on semi-trucks. The bales are trucked to a vendor in Albuquerque. The vendor breaks open the bales and sorts them into separate materials. They sell the materials to the market.
Trash service offsets the cost of recycling. So it tends to be expensive and it varies depending upon what material we're talking about. Cardboard has a value. Glass, because it's heavy and we're far away from a market that can use it, doesn't have much of a value here. So it depends on what material it is. There's a whole variety of things that can be recycled. We've got everything from cardboard, paperboard like cereal boxes. There's then, so those are some of your paper products. So you've got plastics 1 through 6, like you mentioned. You've got glass. You've got the milk carton containers. Those can be recycled. You can even recycle paint, so you can't do that in the single stream. You can recycle plastic bags. Also can't do that in single stream. There's a lot of things that we can recycle that are not necessarily in our single stream as well. That we can think about electronics, batteries, all that type of stuff.
Okay, thank you.
So when the city of Durango started the single stream recycling program, we wanted to be able to add more different types of materials in the mix of it all. So at that time we found vendors that would take the 1 through 7 plastics along with other materials. I mean, it also helps keep more recycled material out of the landfill. So in the long run, it helps.
So our national recycling rate is 34%, and that's recycling and municipal solid waste. So figuring out the recycling rate in that you put it all together and then you divide out what is actually being recycled. In Durango, I just figured out our numbers. It's 29%. So we're close to the national average. But if that gives you an idea, I mean, we do have another 70% that we could be recycling and reusing. We used to have that little triangle that said recycle, reduce, reuse. And now people have just kind of fallen onto the recycling part without using the reduce and the reuse. So really emphasizing in education and outreach on the reduction and the reuse portion of our materials and not just the recycling. That should probably be your last go-to is to recycle it. And I think it's really important for us to think long-term, and when you think about recycling, the long-term effects of it is.
Backcountry skiing is really fun because it's making you earn your turns. You got to hike, you got to work for it. It's not just as easy as taking a chairlift and picking a run. There's also some factors in picking your trail that you want to ski down, also the way that you get up as well. It's a whole 360 as far as getting up there and getting down safely.
I love backcountry skiing because I love being outside and I love skiing, and I like having to work to get to skiing places, so that's what makes it fun for me.
I just love getting out in the outdoors and get away from the people and be able to spend some time in nature, hiking, and for some good turns, hopefully.
Because it's quiet, you're with your pals, you can do your own thing, and everybody keeps their eye on each other. It's really a lot of fun.
I would say the most common mistake people make is they get mad pow disease. And mad pow disease is getting really excited about skiing fun snow. So maybe it hasn't snowed here in like 2 weeks. It hasn't snowed for a while now. And we get a big dump, and people go out and they look at a slope and they go, it looks sketchy. I know we shouldn't ski it. We talked about not skiing it, but I think we should ski it anyway. They get really excited. It's all these human factors that play into it.
Well, at the time I got caught in an avalanche, I didn't know very much. I knew a little bit, but not enough on that day. And since that time, it's been an ongoing learning experience.
Colorado is the leading state in avalanche fatalities and incidents. These graphs show how Colorado ranks compared to other states and which activities lead to the most accidents.
The snowpack evolves with each storm, and those storms form themselves into layers. And then between the storms, during periods of clear weather, like now, but more in the earlier part of the winter, the snow surface evolves into a structure that may or may not provide a good bond for future snowfalls. So
To be safe in the backcountry, especially with avalanche danger, you want to get a level 1 certification, move on to your level 2 avalanche certifications. That way you can consider yourself pretty savvy. The more knowledge you have out there, the more safe you can be. It's really more about not pushing the limits and trying to be as safe as possible, and there's nothing wrong with ever turning around and going back down the way you came up.
First and foremost, just reading the snow conditions and being aware of what's gone on for the whole entire season, not just what happened the night before, but really having a good eye on the snow conditions and the snowpack. Secondly, having the full set of rescue equipment. And third, really analyzing the terrain we're skiing and the aspects to choose the safest slopes to ski during that particular time.
So what do you say to conspiracy theorists that say that ski resorts don't exist?
I didn't even know that such claims were made. That they don't exist?
Yeah.
Oh, I hadn't even heard that one. I guess I would just say drive on up to Durango Mountain Resort or Purgatory or Wolf Creek or Telluride and come skiing with us.
Skiing. It hurts. But how does climate change hurt skiing?
To gauge popular opinion, we came to a local ski shop to find people's opinion on their ski season being ended early.
Well, it's going to shorten it, and in general, it normally makes the quality of the ski season a lot lower as well, so yeah.
It's really disappointing and scary that climate change is affecting us so greatly, and ski season really was about maybe 3 or 4 months.
This snowpack summary shows how the San Juan area is being impacted by climate change. The skinny red line represents the average snowpack. You can see in the recent years we've dropped well below it. Our ski season is also being shortened by about a month. This is important because as City Council member Dick White puts it,
the drying of the landscape, and that means two things. One of which even if we get what has been the historical norm of precipitation, it's going to melt off sooner, and we'll have less water for irrigation in the summertime, and the vegetation will dry out even if it's the same amount of precipitation. So there are issues around water supply, and there's issues of enhanced risk of wildfire. It's 14 years since the 2002 Missionary Ridge fire, but that was a horrendous event for the local economy because people just simply didn't come during that summer, and even it took a couple of years for the tourist economy to come back from that. Unfortunately, it will happen again, and that's clearly the biggest concern we have. And the statistics are for the last 40 years, wildfire frequency has been increasing across the West, and we're not immune to that. We've already suffered from it, and sadly we will suffer again.
this is caused by climate change. This animation will explain how and why this is happening.
The sun radiates huge amounts of energy towards the Earth. Most of it is visible light or shortwave radiation. About half of the incoming shortwave energy is reflected back to space by light-colored surfaces, such as the tops of clouds, ice caps, or desert sands. The other half warms the Earth's surface, which then radiates heat, also known as long-wave or infrared radiation, back towards space. Unlike the incoming shortwave energy, the atmosphere is not transparent to the outgoing long-wave radiation. Carbon dioxide molecules in the atmosphere actually absorb and re-emit it, and a fraction of it comes right back towards Earth. Such absorption and re-emission temporarily traps energy in the Earth's atmosphere, and it is this energy that helps to keep the Earth warm. But when we add more carbon dioxide molecules to the atmosphere, more long-wave radiation gets temporarily intercepted and trapped in the atmosphere, adding additional warmth. And so, as more CO2 is added, the average temperature on planet Earth continues to rise.
What we've done a great deal in terms of city operations internally, not a great deal in terms of any regulations or outreach to the community. I'm hoping that will change in the next year or so. The other things that we're doing this year is we're trying to put together the wherewithal to update the emissions inventory. It's now almost 8 years since that was completed. It was based on 2005 emissions data. And so we've now got the opportunity to update it probably to 2015 and see, well, what has happened? We know that the oil and gas industry has gone into a major dip, which has surely reduced emissions from the county. But what's happened to our transportation, our housing, our waste during the course of that 10 years? We'll have much better data and be able to discover what has happened in the absence of any significant policy initiative. And I'm hoping that we can, particularly in the 2+ years I have left on council, be able to make some additional steps in that direction.
Yeah, I'm maybe not surprisingly a big fan of local renewable energy generation. I think it has multiple benefits. One is it allows the ski area to reduce its environmental footprint and be producing energy in a renewable fashion on site. I think a lot of customers would like to see more of that. But I think it's also a good economic kind of hedge, right? Like people talk about the potential for a ski area, but electricity price increases, and for a business to wisely invest in renewable energy is insulating themselves from potential cost increases for buying electricity off of the grid. So I think it's a good environmental move. I think it's a good customer relations move, and I think it's also a good long-term economic hedging against or the increased electricity costs.
Today we are going to be talking about an issue that affects major bodies of water all over the U.S. and our very own Animas River. That issue is agricultural runoff.
Agricultural runoff is basically water carrying stuff off of land into waterways, into lakes or rivers or oceans. And it can happen from rain or from snowmelt or from irrigation water running over them.
Agricultural runoff, Animas River specifically, I guess, could take a couple different forms, I suppose. One is fertilizer use on farms and ranches around here. Nitrogen and phosphorus is applied. And nitrogen can move off fields and potentially into the river and stream system, so that has some potential to happen. Then I suppose there's also the possibility of animal waste, livestock waste entering the streams and rivers, poo and pee, if you will, from cows, horses, whatever.
So agriculture is what between 60 and 80% of the water in Colorado is used for agricultural purposes. The vast majority of it is used for agriculture. So let's start with that. If it's the primary use of water, right away, it's an impact to our water system to have that water being taken and used for something. And now, more often than not, an agricultural use of water, or a farmer, rancher using water, will divert an amount of water off a river and then use it for a purpose. It could be flood a field, growing those crops, or using it for the cows to drink in a stock tank. But then the excess water is then typically makes its way back to the river, or it sinks into the groundwater table.
We talked to 3 different people to find out what they think we can do to help solve this troubling issue.
Yeah, there's a lot that even, just you and I can do, even though we might not live on a farm or a ranch. Minimizing or using fertilizer and weed killer and pesticides wisely on your lawn, on your garden, or on your fields if you are in agriculture. The instructions for those products tell you how to use them, just the right amount for what you need. For fertilizer, you can get your soil tested, and that'll tell you exactly how much nitrogen or phosphorus you need to put on your fields.
I think the best way to answer is that we don't really know yet. And when I say that, it's, what are we going to do? Are we going to stop growing crops? Are we going to stop a cultural lifestyle? Are we going to stop using water in the way that we do? Not overnight, no. And I think a lot of those ways that we can reduce the amount of pollutants is to simply change the way that we grow crops. In the upper basin, we don't have the amount of frost-free days to produce high-value crops. We typically grow hay more than anything else, hay or corn. Both of those are extraordinarily expensive crops in terms of the amount of water that they need. Those crops are all that we grow in the upper basin. Hay is sold to dairy outfits. A tremendous amount of water is needed to make a gallon of milk. So maybe we should look at the food system and look at what kind of crops we're growing and wage that against an efficiency or a question of, are we using water in the best possible way?
Sure, yeah. I mean, any landowner that has property, and if they're grazing livestock or irrigating fields or fertilizing fields, anywhere within the watershed that where water might run off those fields, in the Florida River, the Animas River, into those, I think it's just good management practices for those people to think about what they're doing, fertilize appropriately. I mean, you have your soil tested, you fertilize with the right amount, you do it at the right time of year. Ideally, put the fertilizer down and then not run irrigation water over it immediately, especially with flood irrigation. You give it time to get into the ground with some, hopefully, rainfall events that aren't excessively heavy.
One challenge with fracking fluids is that not all of the contents of fracking fluid are typically disclosed. So companies will say that they don't want to disclose what the specific mix is or the specific formulation because it's proprietary, it's confidential information, and they won't release it. The industry has moved towards releasing more of that information, but still it's often difficult to figure out what the real, full, complete list of fracking materials are. And even with what you can see, there are plenty of known scary things in there, things that are known carcinogens and that have negative impacts on human health.
So I deal with oil and gas full time in my work, and one of the biggest issues nationally has been this question of hydraulic fracturing. So what's the threat from that I see? Part of it is when hydraulic fracturing, you're putting tremendous pressure onto the rock to break it up, and then you're injecting sand and chemicals along with water in there to hold it open and get your gas or your oil out. And so part of the risk is when you break that rock, it's more of an art than a science. You don't know how far the break is going to go, and so in some instances the break has gone outside of the area they expected, and it's actually allowed the pressure and some of the substance that was put down during the fracking to move into the groundwater. For every 100 oil and gas wells that you drill around here, about 6 are going to have some kind of contamination that gets into water. Now that could be surface water, that could be groundwater, that could be a well, it could just be pressure, so it goes over to a water well and opens it up so that your quantity drops. So that's just based on years and years of numbers. So if you live around an oil and gas well in this county, you have a 6 out of 100 chance that that well is going to cause some water problems for you. So for example, out in Pennsylvania, when they fracture out there in that shale, it's the gas that they're trying to get out now has some pathways, and it's starting to move, and it's starting to get into people's water wells. So that is one of the biggest risks from hydraulic fracturing, which is just one part of the drilling process. Hydraulic fracturing is only one part of the process. So you actually drill a hole first before you then frack it, and then you have a lot of things that come back up before you get the cleaner oil and gas that comes out. That stuff that comes back up is pretty nasty. You don't want to drink it, you don't want to touch it with your skin, and so something has to be done with that. And moving that waste around afterwards actually has a higher risk than breaking the rock and having the methane move.
Today, powering people's homes around the globe is vital, and the means of doing so can be incredibly debilitating to the environment. These forms of pollution impact everyone around the planet. With nearly 8 billion people living on Earth, it should be our goal to protect each and every one. The World Health Organization estimates that 3.7 million deaths are caused each year by outdoor air pollution. That is just over 1% the total population of America. Aside from the health of the citizens of the Earth, the health of the Earth itself is another large issue that we are facing. In 2012, coal power was responsible for nearly 25% of carbon dioxide emissions in the US. The toxic chemicals emitted by these coal plants can cloud cities with smog and even create acid rain. So how can we solve this issue of pollution while also sustaining our ever-growing need for power? It is our opinion that nuclear power is the most viable option for clean energy production in the future. To find out more about nuclear power, we asked William Nollett, Assistant Professor of Physics and Engineering at Fort Lewis College.
I think nuclear power is the largest yield for clean energy in the world.
However, nuclear power has sparked quite a lot of controversy.
Well, I think whether nuclear power is going to be safe or not is going to be greatly dependent on the protocols and the regulatory requirements that are put in place to best ensure its safety. And there's also the disposal challenges that nuclear power has in terms of the used up fuel and the fact that it will last thousands, tens of thousands of years before it's not radioactive anymore. So every source of energy has its pros and cons.
The most modern nuclear reactors that we're working on now are called Generation 4. And so with a Generation 4 nuclear reactor, we actually burn old fuel into new fuel. It's called breeding. So we can breed fuel. We can slide these old fuel rods into the reactor and burn them. It requires a different cooling process. We have to use liquid sodium or liquid lead, or there's a high temperature gas reactor, molten salt. There are several options. And specifically, I work on cooling systems for Generation 4 reactors. The disappointing thing is the first reactors ever made were cooled with liquid sodium. It was called EBR-1 in Idaho, and it actually had that capability, a slight extrapolation from EBR-1, and we could have been burning this fuel. There were a lot of political implications with the Cold War that led us to use water-cooled reactors, which has led to the spent fuel problem. But the spent fuel problem was a problem that was solved before it was created.
What William is saying here is actually quite simple. Some of the first nuclear power plants ever created are actually capable of burning all of their fuel, and therefore they do not produce highly hazardous spent fuel. After the Fukushima disaster, Japan began to idle its nuclear power plants, while importing lots of coal and natural gas. A program manager from the Energy Collective, Willem Post, estimated that Japan importing all of these harmful fuels caused up to 3,426 deaths over the course of 2 years. Alternatively, a study from Bloomberg Business estimated that up to 1,300 deaths could be caused by the Fukushima accident, and that statistic is including the deaths caused by cancer. We can see here that nuclear power does, of course, have its pros and cons. Nuclear power is a base load source of power, meaning that it can run any time of day, so long as it has fuel. Nuclear power is clean, as there are forms of nuclear reactors that do not produce hazardous waste. Nuclear power is efficient and produces large quantities of power. Meltdowns are possible, but even they can be prevented with the correct regulations in place. And here we can see that coal also has its upsides and downsides. Coal power is a base load power source, again meaning that it can run any time. Coal power also produces amounts of power comparable to that of nuclear. Coal power releases toxic chemicals into the atmosphere that we all share. The EPA estimates that burning coal and fossil fuels for electricity adds up to 37% of the cause of global warming. Over days of research and study, we've formulated our opinions based on logic and reason. We are simply here to inform, but it's your decision to advocate for either option, and we can only hope it's a smart one. For more information about nuclear power, visit nei.org or casenergy.org to learn more.
Food is an unavoidable staple in our society. The U.S. produces over 430 billion pounds of food per year. For those that can afford it, America is an all-you-can-eat country.
Pancakes are back. Introducing all-you-could-eat wings only at Golden Corral. Everyone's favorite endless shrimp is back.
People wait for this promotion all year long.
Riblets. Applebee's has riblets. All that you can eat now,
But it's no longer about what we eat. It's about what we don't eat. Because of the natural food cycle, food waste is inevitable. But there are different types of food waste, and some are avoidable.
Throw away $165 billion worth of food every year. That's about 20 pounds per person every month.
The most important thing we have to remember about food waste is that it doesn't become food waste until it ends up in a landfill. Food can be used for so many other things, and just because it is not being used for what it intended does not mean it has to become waste. Humana gets donations from places all over Durango. They use the food they get and volunteers to feed the hungry of our community. On top of being open every day a week, for meals, they have a backpack program for the 9R students to take home food on the weekends.
I think it's just realizing what you eat and don't purchase what you need, and be aware that there are organizations out there, such as Mana Soup Kitchen, that can, we take donations.
While I was at the kitchen, I even got the opportunity to help volunteers. Being here and seeing all the hard work that goes into food prep, it is such a shame to see so much of it go to waste. To learn more about the Mana Soup Kitchen volunteer and donation options, go to themanasoupkitchen.org.
Another surprising fact I learned in my endeavor to find out why so much food is wasted is that 20% of fruits and vegetables are thrown away before they even make it to market. Another 9% is wasted during processing and distribution, and 18.5% during consumption. This leaves only 52.3% of fruits and vegetables that are actually eaten.
Noticed that in our supermarkets we only have blemish-free beautiful fruit? No odd shapes. Almost like the world makes every fruit and vegetable the same, which is not the case. Chad and Stacy from Durango's own Twin Buttes Garden showed me how they took their own handle on this food waste problem and how they make their impact on our community.
So what do we do with our non-market looking produce, or seconds produce as we like to call it here? We have a lot of ways that we deal with our seconds produce. The first option is always to try and sell it. This will typically be at somewhat of a discounted rate, but if it's a carrot, for example, a carrot with character, as we like to call it, maybe one that has a big kink or one that has 4 or 5 legs, doesn't look like just a perfectly straight carrot, that carrot is still just as delicious and just as nutritious as its cousin that looks exactly perfect. If for some reason we can't sell something that's a seconds, usually that's what we will eat as the farmer. You know, all of the best looking produce, we of course try and get top dollar for it and sell it off. The stuff that doesn't look as good is the stuff that we take home and eat ourselves. It's also, we have a CSA up here, or a community supported agriculture. People that can farm share and get a box of food throughout the growing season. So say we'll give them a bunch of those perfectly looking carrots, and we'll set out a bin of the carrots with character, and they'll have the option to maybe grab a few of those extra carrots. If for some reason after that we still have left over, then there's always a donating option. We have the Manna Soup Kitchen here in our community. We have weekly deliveries that we bring to Manna Soup Kitchen. What we'll do is feed the chickens. So we got about 94 chickens up here at the farm, and they love to eat whatever we will give to them. So if it's not being consumed by a human, it's going to a chicken. It's helping to nourish them so that they give us richer, more nutritious eggs. Then they will also compost their manure, and so the cycle is completed with that.
The reason these seconds don't sell is because of the unreasonable expectations that consumers put on them. In order to cut down food waste, there needs to be a major shift in the standards that people put on their organic produce.
In our culture, we've become accustomed to assuming that, you know, apples should be glossy red and totally perfect, and, you know, that this food that we eat somehow should look like, you know, shiny plastic, but that's really unrealistic.
It is important that we keep food waste out of our landfills, because with the 35 tons of food that goes into our landfill every year, there is a significant environmental threat. The food in the landfill with the anaerobic conditions create methane gas, which is a greenhouse gas that contributes to global warming. This greenhouse gas is 20 to 25% stronger than just carbon dioxide. So not only does this food waste problem affect our economy, but it is also having an effect on the world that we live in today.
Then there's food.
In the country, you get more peelings, you get more vegetables. When you're in the city, you get a lot more fast food containers with half-eaten food in them, a lot more pizza boxes.
Another big chunk of food waste comes from expired food. How often do you throw away food after reading a sell-by or best-by date? Safety is obviously very important in consuming food, but are we reading into these dates more than we should? Are manufacturers just stamping us with a fear about perfectly safe foods? Expiration dates became popular in the 1970s when people stopped growing their own food. Consumers wanted to be sure of the freshness that they were getting out of the food that they were buying from someone else. The only item that is actually required by federal law to be labeled with an expiration date is infant formula and some other baby food. Some states also mandate pulling dairy from storage shelves on the expiration date. Because the manufacturing companies have power over most of these dates, they make it as tight as possible so people will throw away and buy their product again sooner. Studies show that 98% of people throw away food that hasn't expired yet, which is the cause of hundreds of pounds in food waste. This brings us to the terminology of these dates. The sell-by date indicates how long the store should display this product on shelves, but food is still flavorful and safe to eat several days after this date has passed, if you store them properly. The best by date comes straight from the manufacturers. This product will be the freshest and have the best taste and texture if you eat it by this date, but it does not refer to food safety. The use by date also comes from manufacturers. It is the last date for peak quality. After this date, taste, texture, and quality may go downhill, even if food safety does not. The expiration date is the only packaging date related to the safety of the food. If this date has passed, throw the food out. Because consumers are so uneducated about these dates, 36 pounds per person of edible past date products have been thrown out each month. It's time to stop crying over spoiled milk.
They're advocating a clear and consistent food labeling system regulated at the federal level.
We think those dates are real. Many supermarkets throw expired food out even before its sell-by date, and they don't donate it for what they think is a pretty good reason.
Do you have anything that's close dated or any calls?
No, we can't do that.
You can't?
No. It's a food health and safety issue.
It's a safety, you can't. Do you guys donate it then, or? You don't donate?
No.
So if...
It goes straight in the garbage can.
It goes straight in the garbage?
Yeah.
So
Can't do it because we get too many lawsuits.
There's too many lawsuits? Have you guys been sued before?
That's a common misconception. We all think that if you donate food and someone gets sick, you can get sued. I thought that until earlier this week. But we looked into it and couldn't find a single case where a food donor has been sued. It doesn't happen. It's a false fear.
Along with educated consumers about expiration dates, there is also another way to keep food out of our landfill.
I think on the issue of food waste that you're touching on, though, there's a lot of restaurants and a lot of local cafeterias, especially in the school system, that do throw away a lot of food each day into the trash can, into the landfill. And I think the need there is for some kind of community composting program on a wide scale. Other cities have enacted those types of programs that collect food waste as well as yard waste and actually turn all that material into landscape grade soil, which can then be sold back so it becomes a sustainable program. And yeah, that's something that I would love to see our local municipality focus some energy
My name is
towards
David
developing.
Golden. I'm the owner of Table to Farm Compost, which provides residential and commercial composting food scrap pickup service. The composting is the biological decomposition of organic materials. And what you're actually doing when you're composting is you're managing a population of soil microorganisms, and they're the ones that are actually breaking down the compost into, or the organic materials into nutrients that can be used by plants. So 46.8% of all landfill waste in the city of Durango is organic materials that potentially could have been composted. About half of that is food scraps that we could potentially be taking. And when food waste is going into the landfill and not being composted, not only is it increasing the need for landfills and increasing the size requirements for landfills, but it's being decomposed anaerobically, and when that happens, methane is being emitted into the atmosphere, which is an extremely potent greenhouse gas contributing to climate change.
We need to make everyone believe that food is far too valuable to waste.
We need to end food waste before food waste ends us.
Oops.
They're eating children! Children!
In the sky above Durango and La Plata County, there is a growing issue: harmful gases and small particulate matter that is polluting our air. One of these main greenhouse gases is methane. Oil and natural gas is one of the things that helps run our daily lives. This helps with driving, heating our homes, and turning on the lights.
So my name is Dan Olson, and I'm the Executive Director for the San Juan Citizens Alliance. So there's a lot of different ways that oil and gas affects air quality kind of at all different realms of the production process. One thing we don't think about is the road infrastructure that has to be created before you even start drilling a well. And so even from that first spot of starting to disturb land and create roads and creating the dust and the particulate pollution, you're starting right off the bat. But obviously during the drilling processes, oftentimes you're drilling a well, and then there may be a phase during which literally they're venting a well.
And so the target of a well may be oil, and there may be gas mixed in, and they will, for days or even longer, simply be venting methane and natural gas, or flaring it, which is burning it on site, before they even start producing any of the actual valuable commodity from their perspective. And then there's also pollution associated with every aspect thereafter. As you are storing and as you are moving natural gas and oil all along the way, there are air quality impacts from things like volatile organic compounds leaking from the system and getting into our airshed.
My name is Bruce Basil, and I work for a nonprofit organization called Earthworks, and I direct the energy program. The Clean Air Act is a statute, so a law passed by Congress, and it's been amended a couple of times, but it was designed to deal with, at the time it was designed to deal with smokestack pollution, you know, like a power plant, or some of the famous cases where there was an ore smelter that also had a big stack and was dumping stuff out. So it was designed to try to limit some of those emissions that came off those big single source smokestack kinds of things. It's now being adapted to try to apply it to oil and gas, where, you know, in this county you've got several thousand wells, each one of them really small compared to a big, Four Corners power plant kind of smokestack, and that's part of why it's become so politically contentious, because when the Clean Air Act was put in a couple decades ago and amended in 1990, they weren't thinking about thousands of small little sources of pollution all over the landscape.
So my name is Tony Cady. I'm the Planning and Environmental Manager for the Colorado Department of Transportation's Region 5, which is 15 counties in the southwest part of the state. How do road structures and well pads have an effect on the environment? So I do know a lot about that. Road structures and development of any kind does have a negative impact on the environment. There's direct impacts associated with the physical improvement itself, that removes habitat from the environment for use by wild animals or native plants. But then there's also what's called the road effect or development effect, which is the kind of the indirect or secondary impacts associated with development that can make areas unsuitable for wildlife as habitat. So there's those. When you remove vegetation from the land surface, you create the potential for air quality impacts in the form of dust, re-entrained road dust from activity that disturbs the ground, and then there's potential for erosion from well pads and road structures that degrades water quality through sedimentation.
So hydraulic fracturing, since almost all wells are hydraulically fractured now, whether it's for oil or whether it's for gas. So that means on each, it didn't used to be that way. Yes, some wells were fracked previously, but not all of them, not as many as they are now. And the scale of what they're doing when they frack now is 10 to 20 times bigger than what old oil and gas wells used to be. They use more water, they use more chemicals, and they're producing more. But then when you have problems now with emissions, you have a bigger emission problem than you had with the smaller wells. So in a way, by hydraulic fracturing has allowed us to produce more oil and gas, but it's also meant that we have more emissions coming off them and feeding into the climate problem. So industry likes to say, well, it's just the hydraulic fracturing we're talking about, and that doesn't have anything to do with it. But hydraulic fracturing has enabled us to produce more, and therefore produce more emissions. And that's the link between them.
The sun releases light photons. Most of these are reflected off the Earth's atmosphere, but some are let in and absorbed by Earth and then released back up into the atmosphere, where they interact with greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases take in infrared photons, which make them vibrate, and then release them back towards Earth. This is a natural process to help keep the Earth warm. But we have sped up this process with oil and gas drilling. There are natural and man-made greenhouse gases. The natural ones are carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor, and nitrous oxide. Methane is one of the most effective greenhouse gases. It is a lot more powerful than carbon dioxide. This is because methane can absorb the infrared photons better than carbon dioxide can.
So what's the best solution for this? And there's a number of different ways we can go about this. Right now, the Bureau of Land Management is going through a rulemaking process, because theoretically they could be setting up regulations and rules that would make sure the industry was regulating this leakage and this waste better. The EPA is also going through a methane rulemaking process. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity by using existing regulatory tools to reduce the contribution from industry to the methane hotspot. And I think it's really important to note that, I mean, literally when we're talking about leaking or purposefully vented or flared methane, we're talking about methane is essentially natural gas. And so we're talking about not just the environmental issues associated with that, whether it be climate change or human health concerns, but we're literally just taking natural gas, a valuable commodity, and we're just losing it into the atmosphere. I believe it was last year enough methane was just lost, leaked, purposefully vented, or purposefully flared that would have powered the city of Chicago for a year. So let's start fixing those leaks. Let's stop venting. Let's stop flaring unless it's absolutely necessary. And we're going to start tackling the methane hotspot problem. I think topics like this are tough, right? Because it's not like you can go out and do a cleanup of your river and pick up trash on the side of the road. These are kind of big regulatory and policy issues that need to kind of come to bear to help solve this problem. I think the best thing that people can do is support organizations that are engaging in those discussions. And oftentimes those organizations will help people understand that if there's an opportunity to call and kind of lobby your senator or your congressperson, there may be times when people can lend their voice to the political process to help ensure that these regulations are done and done well.